In our brave new digital world, we are faced with a fast-paced, short attention span environment in which we need to facilitate the thriving of our students. Education and educators must adapt to adequately meet the needs of the Instagram and TikTok generation. Before I can effectively address the role of digital technology and its role in the modern classroom, the needs of the modern student must be adequately analyzed. First, behavioral and cognitive development. After having spoken with my colleagues at length, I cannot help but conclude there seems to be an emotional developmental stunt that at least correlates with the COVID-19 pandemic. 2 years of taking classes online has resulted in a generation of kids that have missed out on crucial social interactions and emotional maturity, and it shows in my survey results. Their emotional maturity seems to be on the lower side of the spectrum, though I don't have comparative numbers for that and don't really know how we would quantify that data anyway. Their ability to cope with stress needs to be considered, as well as their capacities for problem solving and healthily expressing themselves. Most of my students tend to come from a place of significant fiscal privilege. It deserves to be said, though, these kids may not know the poverty struggle, they still struggle. Several of them, even at 13, have already moved all over the world, which cannot help but have a detrimental effect on their ability to cultivate meaningful interpersonal relationships. My students, for the most part, are the children of celebrities, business magnates, politicians, ambassadors, and various sundry diplomats and successful professionals. I promise this isn't a flex, it'll be relevant in a second. It's therefore reasonable to infer that their parents are extremely high achieving. That fact on its face would usually be believed beneficial, and often it is, but there's a dark side to it as well. There's a significant amount of parental absence in their homes. Kids are left with their caregivers when they're young, and then left to their own devices as they get older. Pursuant to this, there's also a significant amount of pressure for the children to be high achieving as well. Now, a note about Bushido and mental health. There's an interesting correlation between emotional development and the culture here in Japan. Mental health doesn't get discussed. It's considered, for lack of a better word, dishonorable to have mental health issues, and therefore significant portions of the population go undiagnosed for fear of the stigma. There's an old Bushido saying, the nail that sticks out gets hammered, and that unhealthy attitude is pervasive in the culture here, and it isn't limited to health concerns alone. I mentioned in my introduction this generation's propensity for short-form video content like Reels and TikTok. There's also quite a bit of video gaming happening, which I also enjoy, I won't lie, and there's lots of interest in the visual arts, both digital and analog, for lack of a better word. It probably goes without saying, but for the sake of thoroughness, phones, tablets, and laptops are ubiquitous. A net positive we can divine from that is that most students are familiar with some basic technological tools necessary for enhancing their educational experience, especially those students that mentioned Ableton Live and GarageBand. However, these same tools provide endless opportunities for distraction as well. Again, we're coping with some overlap here. The most exciting things relevant to technology I've already mentioned. Fluency with computers, mobile devices, and software is relevant to the disciplines that interest them. I did think it was cool that crochet was mentioned. That seems like a healthy and relaxing way to pass the time. I'm taking the opportunity to consolidate the two final points in the rubric for the sake of brevity, and because I believe that a lack of fluency in English at a school that happens entirely in English qualifies as a special need. I'm in the unique position of being a polyglot myself. My background in operatic performance necessitated gaining a decent command of Italian, German, Latin, Spanish, and French. Living in Japan has also necessitated a competency in Japanese. However, I'm only really conversant in English, Italian, and German. Nonetheless, I do consider myself a student of language and therefore feel confident in saying the command of language that these kids possess is something else. All the languages I speak, save for Japanese, which I'm absolute rubbish at, are Western European. They're all descendants of, according to the nerdiest of linguistic nerds that wholly admit they're still not sure, from a Proto-Indo-European language conceived of and spoken in the Eurasian steppe. My kids are out here speaking Hindi, Bengali, Mandarin, Cantonese, Japanese, things so far outside my wheelhouse the distance has to be measured in Christina Ricci forehead units. To satisfy the pedant in me, I have to address an irascible pygmy elephant hiding in the corner of the room, defining the kind of technology we're talking about. Lexical semantics, broadly speaking, is the branch of linguistics that specifically deals with the meaning of words. Technology, etymologically, is rooted in the Greek techne and logos. The cognate is obvious in the techne, which means craft or art of, but the meaning gets really complicated in logos. Logos in Greek technically means word, breath, spirit, and/or logic. This admittedly pedantic distinction made, I think it's important for me to point out that I'm specifically talking about digital technologies in this video. But that distinction shouldn't be assumed to diminish the importance of mechanical and electromechanical technologies. I mean, pencils, paper, and pianos are still cool. I interviewed 3 educators about technology in their classroom in the interest of meeting students' needs. Ryan, a physics teacher, Rachel, a music teacher, and Julie, a literature teacher. When presented with a new piece of prospective technology that you may use in the classroom, what questions do you ask yourself before integrating that technology into your curriculum? They answered, accessibility of technology, cultivation of engagement and interest, and ensuring a minimum amount of disturbance to the flow of instruction. What programs or applications do you use that you have found the most beneficial to your subject area, and why? They answered, several web-based applications like Kahoot, Google products such as classroom sites, chats, and slides, Turnitin for plagiarism, and musictheory.net and Finale. They also mentioned that iPads and laptops were commonplace. How have you seen technology ineffectively used in the classroom? They answered, phones, which comes as a shock to absolutely no one, and insufficient training of staff and students when trying to integrate digital technology. What is your favorite thing about integrating technology into your classroom? They answered, quoting Ryan, as I thought this answer was fantastic. When I find or create something interesting, I get excited and I get to model my level of learning new things to my students. It's important that they get to see their teachers actually excited about the subjects they teach, and technology provides multiple paths for that. What is your least favorite thing about using technology in your classroom? They answered, the occasional failures that can derail a lesson, depending on the technology due to a lack of understanding fundamentals of the subject, and the frequent disconnect between what administrators and teachers deem to be beneficial technology. Why do you use technology? What's the benefit to your classroom and your students' learning? They answered, differentiation. IB requires music technology, and flexibility of lesson formats, such as flipping the classroom. How has technology made you a better teacher? Or has it? They answered, it facilitates multifaceted approaches to learning. It creates interest for both the students and the educator, and it assists in organization for all involved in the classroom experience. Does your school support your efforts of integrating technology in the classroom, or do you find useful programs or applications on your own and bring them in? They answered, specialization, especially at an IB level, requires the educator to have at least some level of agency in researching and implementing technology. Core classes tend to get more relevant administrative recommendations. What are some of the surprising struggles you've encountered with students when using technology in the classroom? They answered, students playing with the tech rather than staying on target. Though I cannot help but wonder why that's surprising, but whatever, these aren't my responses. And computer illiteracy. What do you do when the technology fails? They answered, don't panic. Digital technologies aren't the only tools at an educator's disposal. Have a plan in place for when the technology fails. There's still a whiteboard, markers, books, paper, and pencils. Use them. To wrap up, digital technology has facilitated these educators with creating multifaceted approaches to learning, such as using GarageBand to create a song to study musical form and analysis instead of just lecturing kids about ternary form and harmonic structures, or using Raspberry Pi applications to automate an LED as opposed to just discussing electrical flow and if-else statements in Python. It also helps both the teachers and the students stay organized. My wife and I can both attest to the profound usefulness of the Google suite of products when it comes to organizing our assignments and our marking. It's important that tasks are well structured or students will start playing around with the tech. Some unstructured play may be encouraged to increase familiarity and comfort with the technology, but the students will need to be brought back around to the tasks and learning objectives the assignment requires. Technology, especially with this generation, is a great way to connect with students that have grown up in our amazing interconnected global community. It does, however, need to be coupled with a competent educator and shouldn't replace the teaching of the fundamentals of any discipline, no matter how specialized or esoteric. The world's changed since we were children, and it's going to continue to change as time marches forward in this new century. Digital technology absolutely has a place in the classroom, and it has demonstrable impact on student interest in all sorts of arenas from core classes to music and art. It is incumbent upon the educator to curate that technology and effectively administer its role in the modern classroom, or some things are bound to get lost in translation.